Experience the joy of watching your friends and family's faces light up when you feed them wild game you harvested and made into delicious sausages. Or meat you barbecue and grill with the finest seasonings available. Visit our friends at waltons.com to find everything you need to turn wild game into tasty meat snacks or spice up your barbecue with new flavors and seasonings. With over 500 seasonings to choose from, there's something that everyone will love. They even have step-by-step videos and how-to articles at Meatgistics to help you go from animal to edible. Use coupon at Rangers15 at checkout to save 15% on your first order at waltons.com. Waltons, everything but the meat.
This is Christian Artist Wade McNutt, and you're listening to the Ranger Report podcast. The Ranger Report, yeah, the Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. Oh, here we go!
This is the Ranger Report podcast. News, insights, predictions, interviews, and information about the Texas Rangers from the major leagues to the minor leagues. And now, here are your hosts, Ben Dieter and CJ Berryman.
Welcome, everybody, to the Ranger Report podcast. I am Ben Dieter. You can find me on Twitter at BDieter75.
I am CJ Berryman. You can find me at CJB_RR.
And you can find us at the Ranger Report on Twitter. And our guest today, Paul Caputo, is from sportslogos.net, and he has his own podcast. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Ben, how are you? CJ, glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, glad to have you. Glad you came along. Now, as I mentioned to you off air before we started, I dabble in the graphic design, and I know that that's what you do for a living. Now, I told you ahead of time, I'm one of those that everybody hates because I'm self-taught.
Well, like I said, I mean, graphic design is you prove yourself out there in the market, right? Because everyone knows when they look at a thing, whether they like it or not, right? I mean, a lot of professions, I mean, you can't tell an engineer, I don't like what you did over there in that bridge, right? Like, yeah. But everyone knows they see a logo and they react right away. I like it or I don't.
Those are the famous last words with an engineer, right?
Well,
right.
Don't talk about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, though. That one probably could have had some improvements. So anyway, no, but so you write for sportslogos.net. How long have you been writing for them now?
I started writing for them in 2014.
And they cover all logos, right? Not just baseball.
They do. They cover everything. I am the minor league baseball correspondent right there. I started writing for them a series called The Story Behind the Nickname, where I would basically call up a team and just say, hey, what's your nickname mean? Why are you called what you're called? And what I found that I really enjoy is that pretty much every minor league baseball team out there that's named for something other than its parent club has a story to tell that's relevant to the local community. And
all those quirky names, there's a reason behind it.
There's a reason behind them. And, I'm a Phillies fan. So one of the first teams I called up, I started getting interested in this in the early sort of 2010s. And one of the first teams I called up was the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. And I was just, to a lot of people who see, just sort of cursory fans who see these teams, they're like, oh, the Iron Pigs, they just pick two names out of a hat, right? And you learn that the Iron Pigs are named after the pig iron that they forge in the steel mills of Eastern Pennsylvania. And so it's like, hey, that's really cool, right? Like that's pertinent to that local community. And so I developed this theory. I don't know if it's a theory, but it's a sort of working premise that you can tell the story of America by understanding why minor league baseball teams are called what they're called. You got the history, you got industry, you got nature, you've got all the aspects of American culture, politics, right? Like, certainly the Rangers represent our political background with the Rough Riders. So, it's been, really interesting. And one of the things I found too is that, I meet someone and they're like, gosh, I'm from such and such a place. And I almost always know something about where they're from because of minor league baseball.
That's fantastic. Well, one reason I wanted to have you on is I've been listening to your podcast, Baseball by Design. So you're talking about what you write. Now you've been getting guests on and actually talking to them about all that. That's been pretty enjoyable for you.
Oh man, I've been having such a great time with it. For all the years that I was writing about baseball, or minor league baseball logos in particular, I always found myself thinking, God, I wish I could just record these conversations and put them out there in the world. I would keep them on my phone, right? Like just because they were sort of fun to listen to. Every once in a while, you'd get like some sort of, kick out of interviewing someone's, quasi famous or whatever. Pete Incaviglia was the manager of a team called the Laredo Lemurs, which you guys might know in Texas there, right? And I'm a Phillies fan, right? He was on that 1993 team. And so I got to interview Pete Incaviglia because of the Laredo Lemurs, right? So anyway, just, I was already recording these conversations on my phone. And I thought, hey, why don't I invest in a decent microphone and start a podcast? And I'll tell you, the pandemic, made us all so familiar with Zoom. That became a real easy thing to start recording these conversations. I edit them in iMovie, which I had been working with before anyway. And so I've been loving doing that and getting to talk to, I love talking to the designers themselves, right? Yeah. So I've gotten to talk to Dan Simon, who's done so many great logos, including your Hickory Crawdads and Jason Klein. He obviously did the Frisco Rough Riders for you guys. And so, so these big time minor league baseball designers have been so much fun to get to know. And it's been, I've really enjoyed it. They, Brandios actually worked on several of theirs because they did the Down East Wood Ducks as well.
Mm-hmm. So I'm from Amarillo, and we have a new minor league team here. How much do you know about the Amarillo Sod Poodles?
Well, so I grew up outside of Philadelphia. I live in Colorado now, and I was not familiar with the term sod poodles when they came out. That's another brand.
What? Neither were we.
Nobody was, right? It's
and then
like
I'm from here. We were like, what the hell is a sod? Oh, it's a prairie dog.
It's a prairie dog. And I live in Colorado now where we have prairie dogs, right? But, it's fun. And Jason Klein from Brandios, he told me, he's like, well, if you Google Amarillo and prairie dogs, you're going to get a lot more things before you get to the baseball team. He's like, but now you Google Amarillo and Sod Poodles baseball team is the first thing there. Yep. So, there's a strategy there. And, the Sod Poodles are one of the most successful teams in merchandise sales out there. And so it works. When they hit on the right thing, it works. And Brandios, they're good at what they do for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what makes a good minor league logo?
Well, we talked about this a little bit already. I'm sure I jumped the gun a little bit, but to me, the very most important thing is just a connection to the local community, right? You need something that aesthetically is attractive, right? And Brandios and Dan Simon and Sky Dillon. There's a lot of designers out there who are creating logos that are aesthetically attractive. But it needs to have that local connection. And when it doesn't have the local connection, to me, like wacky, not wacky, whichever, that's fine, right? If it's connected to the community, that's going to be the one that sticks around for a while. The teams that try to be just wacky for wacky's sake, those are the ones that are going to flame out. They're not going to have the staying power. You're going to see them, get rebranded in a few years, but it's the ones that have that local connection that are going to really stick around. So, whether it's a more serious one like the Wichita Wind Surge, and it's related to, the wind energy that they have in Wichita, a serious one like that, or like a wacky one like your Sod Poodles there, right? Like those are, regardless of how wacky it is, I think it's the connection that makes the difference. And, I think you're seeing a lot of these sort of generic names go away. Certainly you're seeing teams named for their farm clubs go away. There's a few holdouts, right? The Iowa Cubs, the Oklahoma City Dodgers, the generic, the Sacramento River Cats, right?
The Phillies were the same way, weren't they? AA was was it Reading?
Yeah, they were the Reading Phillies. Now they're the Reading Fightin' Phils, which is a reference to the old nickname from like the 50s. Yeah. But their mascot's an ostrich. The logo's an ostrich because it's based on their sort of wacky. They've got a wacky peanut vendor who dresses like an ostrich, right? So, and they used to have the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons as their AAA team. Now that's the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs. And then they've got the Clearwater Threshers. Clearwater Threshers used to be the Clearwater Phillies. Now they're the Threshers, named after some sharks. And, of course, the Jersey Shore Blue Claws, who have a crab as their logo. So that's my Phillies farm clubs right there.
So there's always some odd alternate minor league logos.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the strangest ones that you have seen alternatively?
Well, so I do love these alternate brands, right? And there's different classifications of the alternate brands. First of all, you've got the Copa de la Diversión, where they have the Spanish language brands aimed at sort of bringing in different, different folks from, Spanish speaking fans in different communities. My favorite sort of wackiest one there is from the Richmond Flying Squirrels, who just did like a Spanish translation of Flying Squirrels, which is Ardillas Voladoras, and made him like a Mexican wrestler. So they put him in like a luchador mask, right? And so
like a Rey Mysterio type deal, yeah.
Exactly. So that's a great one. Sometimes they'll just do, you'll see like the Akron traffic cones, right? Like they'll just do something that's like, hey, there's a lot of traffic around here. We're going to be funny about it. The Bowling Green Hot Rods did one that was just hilarious, where there was a famous incident. They've got the Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And there was a famous incident where a sinkhole opened up under the museum and they lost like 16 Corvettes into this sinkhole.
Oh, no.
And
so to give one of those Corvettes to me.
Right. You could have had that one. And so the Bowling Green Hot Rods did a promotional night where they were the Bowling Green sinkholes. And and that was and like nobody outside of Bowling Green like got what was going on, but like everyone in the local community thought it was great. Obviously, the one that we see a lot of now is the food-based one, and the food-based logos that was started by the Fresno Grizzlies. It used to be AAA. Now they're single A. They're a Rockies affiliate now, but the Fresno Grizzlies, like 8-9 years ago, rebranded for a weekend as the Fresno Tacos. And they did that because Fresno apparently has a lot of taco trucks, and they would do like a thing called the taco truck throwdown at their ballpark, where taco trucks would show up and they would just basically like have like a contest for the best tacos in Fresno. And so one year they just decided, like early on in the days of these temporary rebrands, they rebranded as the Fresno Tacos, and it was a massive hit, right? Like it was a huge hit. Right around the same time, my Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, they were introducing their like bacon themed logos. And so the Tacos and the Iron Pigs got into this like contest where they kept like rebranding their food-based identities. The Iron Pigs did like a cheesesteaks night. They did in Philadelphia, we call sprinkles Jimmy's. And so they rebranded as the Lehigh Valley Jimmy's. And then all these other teams started doing rebrands based on local flavor. So like the most recent one, the Akron Rubber Ducks are now, they're rebranding as the Akron JoJo's, which was a phrase I had never heard before used to describe breaded and fried potato wedges. And so I researched this. I researched like the whole history. I know way more about fried potato wedges than I ever thought I was going to. But like, I don't know, the Delmarva Scrapple is another one. They're named after this weird meat product from Philadelphia, which, Ben, if you've got some experience, if you've got roots in Philadelphia, you may know what Scrapple is, but it's like all the stuff they won't put in hot dogs, basically, and they like grind it up into a paste and fry it up. So, So anyway, all these food-based ones out there, and it seems like every team basically is doing, a food-based rebrand, a temporary identity.
And see, I was stationed in the Air Force for 6 years, and it just so happened to be I was stationed in Alamogordo, New Mexico, when the El Paso Diablos changed from the Diablos to the El Paso Chihuahuas.
Exactly.
And I thought that was a great rebranding. that perfect rebranding.
The Chihuahuas are the one that Brandios will tell you. They describe a thing called the J curve, and the J curve is like actual scientific research that describes the reaction that people have to seeing something new that they hate. And then like going through essentially what are like the 5 stages of grief to come around to accept it and finally like love it, basically. And Jason Klein from Brandios said that the El Paso Chihuahuas had the steepest, sharpest J curve of anything they've ever done. Like people hated it more than they hated any other thing that Brandiose has ever done, turned around, absolutely loved it, broke every record for merchandise sales. And so it's, I've got a hat back here on my wall. I've got a Chihuahuas hat behind me here. So, cause I love it. And, but I didn't have a connection to the Diablos, and before the Diablos was the Dukes, of course. No, I'm sorry. That was Albuquerque. That was the Albuquerque Dukes.
Yeah, I was about to say Albuquerque.
Yeah. So
what's funny about that whole thing is, my family, we have 3 generations of Chihuahuas, and I hate Chihuahuas. Other people's Chihuahuas, mine are just fine.
Sure.
My family is just fine. But yeah, we have 3 generations of Chihuahuas going back to my childhood. And so when they changed the name to that, I was like, what, did they bark? And they all bark, no bite, bark and run,
My 2 favorite over last season watching baseball here in Texas was during the Texas State Fair. Frisco did the Frisco Corny Dogs. That was a good one. And then I think the best one, the Corpus Christi Hooks, are, it's Whataburger Park. And they did the Whataburger Honey Butter Chicken Biscuits.
God bless
it. Their jerseys were orange and white striped. It was pathetic looking, but it was so funny. It was so funny.
You could argue too that the first food-based identity was really the Montgomery biscuits.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, true. Which is a great one. Absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of Texas, which Rangers minor league logo is your favorite, and which one do you think could be improved on a little bit?
So I really like the Hickory Crawdads.
Yeah.
That one. If I were going to own some gear from some of these teams, I would go with the Crawdads. Really like that one a lot. I mean, I like all of them. I like the side stories that they have. The Round Rock Express they're named for Nolan Ryan's fastball, right?
Yep.
Like the Express is so that's cool because there are about 12, 15 teams out there that are related to the railroad industry. You guys in Texas, you've got the Cleveland Railroaders as well, the Independent American Association team. So that's a good logo. That's a Brandiose product. And, it's, I like that brand. It's probably the most serious of all of them. The Rough Riders, the whole like Teddy Roosevelt story, right? Like, I mean, that's just a great brand right there.
Yeah.
And there's a new team called the Glacier Range Riders, and they've got a bear in like the National Park Service bus, holding a bat, like a big stick. And I think he's a teddy bear holding a big stick, just like Teddy Roosevelt does.
Walk softly and carry a big stick.
Speaking softly, carrying a big stick. Exactly. So the one I don't think I would necessarily, it could be improved on because, I'll tell you, I am a graphic designer. That is my background, but I try not to engage too much in that game that graphic designers love to play of criticizing each other's work, because that is something graphic designers love doing. But I would say the one that sort of speaks to me the least out of the Rangers affiliates is the Down East Wood Ducks. And, maybe that's just because I don't have any sort of connection to, decoy ducks or the sort of scripty font on that one. I don't love as much as some of these other ones. But all 4 of your teams have logos that are designed by, one of the big firms out there. Mm-hmm. And visually it's a strong set of logos for one franchise.
So what are some of your favorite minor league baseball ballparks to visit?
So I do a thing with my buddies called Baseball Palooza. And every year we pick a different part of the country and we go see 4 games in 4 days. And so I've been lucky to get to see some great minor league ballparks. Probably the sort of quintessential minor league baseball experience to me. And this has a lot to do, I think, with just the sort of sentimentality of this team for minor league baseball fans, but the Durham Bulls, Athletic Park, going to see a Durham Bulls game. Like, first of all, it's in a cool part of town. They've got this great brewery right there by the ballpark. They've got the Hit Bull Win Steak sign out in the outfield that is the only carryover from the old ballpark where the movie was filmed. And that was just a really just fantastic baseball experience. Some of the other ballparks that I've really enjoyed, AAA obviously has a lot of great ballparks. I really liked Albuquerque. Going to see the Isotopes there. They have the whole like Simpsons theme, of course, right? So they've got like the Simpsons statues and everything. The Nashville Sounds have a beautiful ballpark. That was another great one. And while I object to the parent club name, the Oklahoma City Dodgers have a great one. Salt Lake Bees have this amazing view of the mountains out behind beyond their center field wall. Yeah. And then, I've seen some good independent ones too. The Missoula Paddleheads. We did a road trip up in Montana a few years ago or last summer, actually. The Missoula Paddleheads. They've got this, situated right there in the mountains in Montana with this like incredible scenery. And so those are some that are sort of classically good ballparks. And I could probably go on. The Portland Sea Dogs was a classic. The Asheville Tourists in North Carolina. These are all just like really beautiful ballparks, places. And I'm sure there's a bunch I'm leaving out. I went and saw the Wichita Windsurge last year. They've got a brand new ballpark that's really nice. But the one that I sort of want to highlight, it exists, but they don't have a team there anymore. In fact, I think the Down East Wood Ducks exist. It's not the same franchise, but I think they popped up to replace the Bakersfield Blaze.
Bakersfield, yep.
Yeah. And so on one of these road trips, the very first baseball palooza that we did, we went and saw a game at Sam Lynn Ballpark in Bakersfield, California. So it's August, it's 120 degrees in Bakersfield. This ballpark, that's sort of a glamorous term for what is essentially just like a city park, right? Like it's just like surrounded by like a chain link fence with some like metal bleachers. And the really great thing about Sam Lynn Ballpark is that it was built backwards. And what I mean by that is most ballparks are built facing east,
right?
So that the sun is setting behind the batter, so that you're not staring at the setting sun while you're trying to bat in the third inning of a night game. Well, Sam Lynn Ballpark was built, 100 some years ago before they were really worried about night games. And so it was built facing the wrong direction. So when we went to this game there, everything about this ballpark, one time they had a sprinkler malfunction and the field got covered in water. And a coach from a team called the Visalia Oaks, who are now the Visalia Rawhide, he suggested just pour some gasoline on it and light it on fire. And they did that, and they scorched the hell out of the infield, and they had to play on a scorched infield for the entire year because no grass grows in Bakersfield. But my favorite thing about that was the game being paused in the third inning while the sun set behind the center field wall. Like they just basically had nothing else they could do except for like pause the game behind the center field wall. So for all of these like classically beautiful ballparks that exist out there,
you got to pick one ugly one, right?
that experience in Bakersfield was just like such a classic minor league baseball experience, right? Like it's just everything about like small town, like goofy, quirky minor league. It felt like a real Bull Durham moment, right? Like that. It felt very much like you want a rain out, I'll get you a rain out. So
that is a fantastic story, Paul. That is a fantastic story.
That is great.
All right. Well, I think, and I wanted your opinion, being a big minor league fan, do you think the lockout could wind up being good for minor league baseball since they're kind of going to be the only ones going?
I'll tell you, that's a glass half full way of looking at this. I appreciate that sentiment there. The big fear obviously is that the sport itself will just lose fans in general. I think about it from a perspective here in Fort Collins, Colorado. We've got a new independent minor league team just down the street that's just starting this year, the Northern Colorado Owls with a Z. And, I think a lot of people who are looking for a baseball fix will go see an Owls game, right? It's about an hour for me to get to Denver to see the Rockies game. It's going to be a whole lot easier for me to get to an Owls game. And I think a lot of people who are looking for, to your point here, they're looking for their baseball fix. They've got a new team right around the corner. And, if you're south of Denver, you can go see the Rocky Mountain Vibes with their awesome marshmallow logo, or you could come see the Northern Colorado Owls. And, that's I think the possibility exists that minor league baseball will see an increase in people subscribing to the MILB First Pitch app and the TV streaming service for teams that offer that. So yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope that the thing you see on Twitter these days is every minor league baseball team out there trying to convince people, like remind people like, hey, we're not affected by the lockout. Yeah. We're not affected by the lockout. So I do have another funny story since I mentioned the vibes, by the way, and I'll keep it quick, but they had a name the team contest, and the name that won was the Rocky Mountain Happy Campers. And so they developed this whole brand around Rocky Mountain Happy Campers. And then like literally like a month before they were about to unveil the name, the president of minor league baseball, Pat Connor, he's since retired. He discovered that there was a marijuana dispensary of the same name, Rocky Mountain Happy Campers. And the team knew about it and they didn't think it was a problem. But he decided, you know what, we can't have that out there in the world right now. And so we don't need that energy. So he made them change. And so they had to come up with a name that fit all of this branding they had already developed, because you couldn't possibly in a month create new branding. No. So Rocky Mountain Vibes is meant to be about the, you know, like the feeling that you get when you are camping. And it's just because they couldn't be the happy campers.
That is a funny story. All right. So who's been one of your favorite guests so far on your Baseball by Design podcast?
Well, so I mentioned Dan Simon a couple of times. You know, I really do love talking to the designers. I was extremely lucky that Dan Simon, who is incredibly talented and I think probably, you know, not cheap. I don't know what he charges, but I think these high end designers deserve to charge, you know, a good amount for what they do. He just reached out to me and out of the goodness of his heart offered to design a logo for my podcast. And I was,
nice. And
he did such an amazing job with it. I collect helmet Sundays from these ballparks, right? So I've got a huge collection of those. And so
you got a little bit of a plethora up behind you there.
Well, yeah. So I've got the hats here behind me, but out in the basement, in the, you know, the back room here, I've got a shelf with 350 helmet Sundays on it.
Wow.
So every one of them different. And so, but he is, you know, Dan Simon and Jason Klein are both just like, so like sort of thoughtful and introspective about the process of graphic design that, you know, I love talking to them about graphic design. Todd Radom is another designer. He did the Wichita Wind Surge and he did the Brooklyn Cyclones, and he's done like Super Bowl logos, and, you know, he does the Big Three basketball thing. And so he's done a ton, but I just, for pure, just like the thrill of getting, you know, the guests on was I got to speak with Jamie Farr, who played Klinger on MASH.
Ben was talking to me about this right when you went to go get a drink.
So when he wasn't wearing women's clothing, right, he was trying to get the Section 8 discharge. So he would wear women's clothing. When he stopped with that, he was from Toledo and grew up watching Toledo Mud Hens games. And so they thought it would be funny to make him like a Toledo Mud Hens fan on the show on MASH. And so here's like 11 million people a week watching this TV show with Klinger wearing Toledo Mud Hens gear. And I had spoken to him once years ago for an article on sportslogos.net. And I just emailed him and I said, hey, we talked a while ago. And he's like, yeah, I remember. And I said, would you be willing to come on the podcast and have essentially that same conversation again? And he's like, sure, I would. And so, you know, I sent him a Google invitation and Zoom information. And sure enough, there he was, like right at the scheduled time. He comes on. He's got like some of the jerseys that he had from when they recorded MASH.
Wow.
He's got like the bobbleheads that the Toledo Mud Hens did for him when they were doing that. And he had been recording what do you call it? The cameo things, like where you pay $50 and the celebrity says happy birthday to your mom or whatever. He had been recording cameos all morning. And so he's like, he was already set up and, had the tech already up and running. So, and he kept throughout the entire interview, he would say, I'm 87 years old. And he would tell me about like all the famous people who he knew who were now dead. And so, but it was still like, I grew up watching MASH. I mean, I love that show. And so that was a total thrill. So So that was really
I
fun.
still watch MASH. I mean,
it's great.
I grew up on it. Yeah, it's a timeless treasure, man.
It is. Another guest who I really liked is a designer. Well, he's an artist who creates characters for like Disney and Fraggle Rock and the Muppets, and he's worked with Jim Henson and that sort of thing. And he's worked with he worked with the Portland Sea Dogs and the New Britain Rock Cats, and he's done a couple of different logos, but he created the Portland Sea Dogs logo that I just absolutely love. And so it's when he does the Nancy and Sluggo cartoon. So it was like really fun to talk to this guy who's like a huge baseball fan, created this logo because he loved it and wanted to create, a character for a baseball team. And that's where the Portland Sea Dogs came from. And so, those are just some folks, I've gotten to speak with, like play-by-play announcers. Emma Tiedemann was the Portland Sea Dogs, is the Portland Sea Dogs play-by-play announcer. Emily Jansen was the first AAA general manager who was a woman. I got to speak with her. And so, so some cool folks. But if I had to pick just one, I would say Jamie Farr.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that one. So
yeah.
I got kind of a fun story about mascots. I was in 2019, right before COVID. I was covering a Sod Poodles game, and I'm in the media well right next to the dugout, and there's Moises Alou. Wow! And I'm like, I didn't know he was the hitting coach for the San Diego Padres, but yeah, he'd come down and he was watching them. And then there's I got a picture with Hideo Nomo. I got to cover Fernando Tatis Jr. and got a picture with him. But the funnest night that I got to cover them was when the Padres had the famous chicken.
Yeah.
And so he came down, and the Sod Poodles at the time were the AA farm club of the Padres. So the famous chicken came in, and this guy's been doing it for 40 years. Yeah. However long. Yeah. And, he's still as energetic as all hell. Yep. And there was it was like in the middle innings, and they had banter between Ruckus, which is the Sod Poodles mascot, and so he's out there, the famous chicken's doing his thing, and then he runs up to Ruckus, and Ruckus has his arms crossed and just looking at him like, man, you're stealing my show. The famous chicken just gets down on his knees and goes, I'm not worthy. It was so neat.
Oh, that's awesome.
My favorite covering a minor league team story is the opposite of that. I was at a Round Rock Express game. This is years ago. They were retiring Jackie Moore, who he went into their Hall of Fame.
Jackie Moore.
And I'm on the field, it's my first game to cover ever. Like I'd never covered anything before.
I know this story.
And I'm standing there and they go, oh, here comes someone to interview. And I turn around and it's Nolan Ryan.
Nice. That's
because he's friends with Jackie Moore, and his son owns the team. And so anyway, like the whole time I'm just staring at him. And I told CJ, there's no way I could have asked him a question because it would have come out like blubber because, I spent my whole life idolizing him. I grew up in Texas as he was a Astro and then a Ranger, and it's just, it was so funny. I had nowhere. I just stared at him. Everyone else probably thought I was mute or something. I just stared at him for the entire, 10-minute interview.
Well, unfortunately, I did that. I did ask Paul Goldschmidt a really dumb story at a Memphis Redbirds St. Louis Cardinals spring training game in Memphis. And I had interviewed him once before. The Diamondbacks reached out to sportslogos.net and said, we'd love you to cover our new logos when they came out with like the dark gray pants and the whole, really wacky. They were trying to promote it, and they reached out to Sports Logos and they asked if we would cover it. And so they set up an interview for me with like some players on the team, and they tried to sort of position it as the players designed these logos. And so I had an interview with Paul Goldschmidt, and we talked about it for a little bit and it went fine. And then years later, I was at this game in Memphis when he was on the Cardinals, and, all these people are like gathered around and they're asking him questions. And I was just like, Paul, years ago, you and I spoke about the Arizona Diamondbacks new uniforms, and I said, instead of just being like, now you're on the Cardinals, my question was, now you're on the Cardinals, how do you like playing on the Cardinals with a much more sort of like conservative uniform and a classic look? But instead, what I said was, I'm not sure if you remember that interview. And then paused as if he was going to say like, oh yeah, Paul, absolutely. I remember that. And he just
dead silence, didn't you?
Dead silence. And everyone turns around and looks at me like this. And so and he was kind about it, right? Like he didn't like burn me or anything, but I was just like, anyway. And so, but it felt like a half hour of silence there before I was just like, anyway.
There's a famous beat writer for the Dallas Cowboys that is known for not pulling any punches.
I was about to do that. And I have my own story, but with an interview we just recently had with Brad Sham. So I'll let Ben tell his story.
His name is Mickey Spagnola, and I used to do a general sports podcast, not just a baseball one. So we had him on, and it was when Tony Romo was having all of his back problems.
Oh yeah.
And so, my first question to him, I thought I'm going to throw up a softball question, and it was something like, how important is it for Tony Romo to, come back healthy and blah, blah, blah. And there was like 3 seconds of silence. And he said, that is such a stupid question.
It's such a terrible feeling.
My co-host who helped edit it, that plug, he used that clip for the next 5 years.
Of course.
Every time I asked a question, that clip would show back up. So but I mean, and it was a stupid question, but I thought, well, I'll just throw him up a softball. And of course, he's been covering him for 30 years at that point.
Yeah. It's like, here's an invitation to talk, right?
Yeah, and he's like, yeah, that was stupid. And I was like, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
And so we had Brad Sham, Hall of Fame broadcaster for the Dallas Cowboys, on a couple months ago, or was it like 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, it was pretty recent. And of course, I'm starstruck. I've listened to Brad Sham my whole life, and he did this good, long, elaborate answer, and I just had the next question in my head, and instead of it could can you follow up and can you elaborate a little bit more on that? I asked a follow-up question that he had just answered with his previous question. And so I asked him the question. He just flat out goes, did you not listen to anything I just said?
Oh, man.
And because I'm the editor of this show, that made it on the actual podcast.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
We're nothing if not humble on this podcast. We make fun of ourselves more than anything.
You have to, right? You have to.
Yeah.
I do have just a quick funny story, the sort of reverse of that, where I was, again, Chris Creamer from sportslogos.net got me credentials at spring training to go ask the Rockies. The Rockies were unveiling essentially a new shade of purple because their old purple looked too blue on television. And so Chris sends me in here.
No, it didn't.
And so I'm like, I have a press credential into the Rockies clubhouse, right? Like, so I feel good about that. And I'm like, and then when I finally get it all set up, I'm like, I got to go ask players about a shade of purple. And so I get in there and, I've had,
is it like a different purple, like a Prince purple, or just
right. Exactly. Well, and that was sort of the question, right? Like this one over here is like, if you look at it, it was bluer, like side by side. This one here is a little bluer than this one here, which is sort of more purple. And so I get in there and I did 9 interviews with Rockies players. Carlos Gonzalez, Trevor Story. I mean, like big names. And these guys were, some of it was, they were all kind to me. No one was unkind to me. I did have one player who was just sort of like, I'm not really your guy. He's like, this is my first year on the team. And he's like, and he was totally kind about it. He didn't big time me or anything, but like, the fact that I was asking these guys about the color purple, but Nolan Arenado, first of all, I waited for like 15 minutes to talk to him because he was talking to some other like blogger basically about his gear. And he's like showing him his glove and he's like so like psyched about all this stuff. So I finally like get my turn and he turns and he looks at me and I'm just like, oh God, this is going to be a disaster. And I'm like, I'm Paul Caputo. I write for sportslogos.net. And, you guys are playing with a new purple, thoughts on the shade of purple. And he went into, I swear to God, like 15 minutes of how psyched he was about the new purple, because rant about like he likes the black vest with the sleeves and he likes that. And I was just like, this is like the most ridiculous, like, this guy is worth millions of dollars. And like, he's talking to me about the shade of purple that the Rockies are wearing. I couldn't believe the quotes I got for this article. So,
oh, that's good.
That's amazing.
I do have to say one last thing, CJ, about, just our stories here. This was 4th of July in Colorado Springs in 2014. So they were still the Colorado Springs Sky Sox. The famous chicken was there. And my daughter, who was 6 at the time, got picked out of the crowd to dress up as a baby chicken and go out on the field with the famous San Diego or the famous chicken.
Nice.
And there were 4 little kids. She was baby chick number 1. And the routine was everything he did, they had to sort of like imitate. And so
they
he's
did the
doing
same thing. They did the same thing in Amarillo. Yeah.
So like the laugh that, so the chicken goes and like lifts his leg like he's peeing on the umpire. Right. And then my daughter Maya lifts her leg like she's peeing on the umpire, and just the crowd just like erupts, right? And I was just like, that's my daughter out there.
Dude, that is awesome.
That's my chicken story.
Yeah, he did the peeing on the umpire thing a couple times in that game.
So good.
That's funny. All right, well, before we let you go, we always ask guests that we have in Texas about Whataburger. Have you ever tried Whataburger?
Yeah, I was. So I get to travel a fair amount for work, which is nice. And we had a conference in 2016 in Corpus Christi, and it was November, so the Hooks were not in town. But we had a Whataburger just down the street, and I have to say, and I may lose some people over this. I have been to In-N-Out a number of times. I think In-N-Out is just like a regular fast food burger. There's nothing.
I agree. There's
nothing that special about it to me. I like the culture of it. I like the place. I mean, I've been in Vegas. I've been in California, and it's like
good. Don't get me wrong, but
I will go get an In-N-Out burger whenever I'm in a place that has them, because it's like part of the experience. The palm trees and the sunshine, and but Whataburger, loved it. Absolutely loved. Like genuinely. Oh, that's a good question. I probably like something with 2 patties, because I'm sort of a glutton when it comes to this.
Double meat.
Double meat. Yeah. It's, so I don't remember exactly what I ordered. It was 6 years ago or 5.5 years ago. So, but I did spend a week in Corpus Christi, ran past Whataburger Field a couple of times. It was a couple miles from the hotel. So I actually planned out a running route to go sort of along the Gulf there, and then into the, past, just to see the ballpark.
Yep.
But then we probably ate at Whataburger like 4 or 5 times. Like it was like the lunch. And so I'm a huge fan.
All right.
I loved when the Hooks did like their Whataburger based temporary identity. Like they have that sort of that logo there. So I will admit, I thought it kind of looked like the Wonder Woman logo.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Great burger. Huge fan. I love the Hooks logo too, which is the other team named for a Nolan Ryan pitch.
Correct.
So that named for his curveball. So
the Hook.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, Paul, if you're ever in the come down to see the Frisco Rough Riders, let me know, and I'll take you out to a game.
I absolutely want to get there. I'm a huge Dr. Pepper fan, so I'm bummed that the ballpark isn't named for Dr. Pepper anymore. But
I still call it Dr. Pepper Park. But
I think you should, because they don't really have another naming partner now.
They do not.
And I want to get out there and do that lazy river out there in the outfield.
It's just like I call their division, the Texas League. It's not the Texas League anymore, but I'm still calling it the Texas League.
Right.
I don't care.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, all those old leagues, the Midwest League, the California League, the Pacific Coast League.
Pacific Coast League, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
hey, if you're ever around Amarillo, come see the Sod Poodles.
Amarillo is a 7-hour drive from Fort Collins, Colorado, and I have looked at that a couple of times. Like, I could get down there for a Sod Poodles. I could go see like the Sod Poodles and the Chihuahua in a weekend, right? Like that, and see the Albuquerque Isotopes on the way back. And
there you go.
So gentlemen, I appreciate that. I will take you up on that if I'm in Frisco or Amarillo, because
we'll eat some Whataburger.
Now that
there's a million Whataburgers around Amarillo, bro.
You are sweeting the pot right now. Absolutely.
See. All
right, Paul.
I'm a good negotiator. I'm way better than Rob Manfred. I can tell you that.
Well, that's a low bar. That's low hanging fruit right there.
Yeah, I don't have to try too hard.
All right, Paul Caputo, sportslogos.net and Baseball by Design podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, guys. This was a blast. I'm a fan of what you do.
The Ranger Report. Yeah, the Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. Oh, here we go. No talking about the season. Well, who'll be the next Colossus of clout? We're stuck in the pit of despair, known as the MLB lockout. Lots of talk about luxury tax. that's taking center stage. How about you just raise the floor on minimum spending so guys can make at least minimum wage? Oh, the Ranger Report. Yeah, the Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. All right, one more for you. Commissioner Manfrod says the MLB ain't making money and such. But I'm guessing because of inflation, $50 billion ain't that much. Oh, here we go. The Ranger Report. Yeah, the Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. Yep.
Thanks for listening to the Ranger Report podcast. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and at therangerreport.com.